Hello, everyone. We're going to look at a game from 2017 between Vladimir Kramnik and Anish Giri. Kramnik had the white pieces, Giri had the black pieces. Get right into it. Kramnik opened up at night with knight f3. Giri responded with d5. This is from the Norway chess tournament, by the way, so it's a classical game. Um, Kramnik is going to employ the Colle system, which is very solid opening. Uh, it's like a reverse Slav. Depending on what variation you play, it can be a reverse Slav if you want to look at it that way, as far as the pawn structure is concerned, or it can be like a reverse Tartakower uh, uh, defense, and the Queen's Gambit declined, depending on the variation. So we'll look at that in a second. So knight f6, very straightforward development. No Queen's Gambit here, as you can see. Kramnik is probably trying to avoid just main lines at this time. At point in Kramnik's career in 2017, he's no longer world champion. Of course, still a very strong player, above 2,800. But he's probably not, trying to um, keep up with the youngster Gary in the latest opening theoretical debates. So he opts for the reliable Colle system. And here you see Bishop D3. Gary responds with the move C5. And here, Kramnik plays an interesting move. He just castles here, which of course is acceptable, but it gives Gary the opportunity to play this move C4, gaining more space on the queen side. So it has its demerits. Although it gains space on the queen side, it does take pressure off the white center and makes it easier for white to get in e4 later on, as there's no pressure on the d pawn. However, this does take time, and this allows black to gain space on the queen side. So it's kind of a toss-up here as far as which side actually will benefit here. But so far, white is ahead in development. Black is not really made much progress in that department, save for the knight on f6. And if white can somehow open the position, which is his usual prescription for this situation, then he can kind of expose black for neglecting his development. So normally in situations like this, white will immediately try to open the position after, say, bishop e2. He'll try to get moves in like b3 and start getting some files open to attack this queenside situation. What you will see more commonly instead of castle here is you'll either see this move, c3, and of course if c4, then the bishop can still stay on this long diagonal here, because in the Colle system, white is trying to build up energy in the center. So after playing moves like castle, for example, in knight bd2, you can see all of this force is building up to make this break eventually. This is the classical variation of the Colle system, and this is why I say it looks kind of like a reverse Slav because of the pawn structure. So this would be known as the Koltanowski Colle system variation, right? Koltanowski was a player who played the Colle system very much after the originator, Edgar Colle. He continued to keep it in his repertoire and popularize it. The other variation that you see with b3 that Kramnik actually played in the game is known as the Zukertort variation. And this variation is slightly different, as the bishop is not looking to get out of the pawn chain after, say, e4 and come here, for example. But usually this bishop will sit right here. So again, let's play knight c6. Just some demonstration moves here. Okay, let's be good. And castle. And the bishop is sitting right here on b2, and you can see the effect it has right on the a1 to h8 diagonal, and you get all of the typical moves, knight e5, eventually even the f4, etc. Sometimes you'll still get this move in. And this is why I said it looks like a Tartakower variation in Queen's Gambit declined, because with the reverse colors, because of the fee and kettle nature of the bishop. And oftentimes too, once this bishop commits to this square, black will often take here and fix the pawn on d4, just as white does with the colors reversed to black. When black commits his bishop in the Queen's Gambit decline, Tartakower variation on b7. So if you play that as black against the queen pawn, it might be a good idea to save yourself some time and play this is white also, right? It all depends on your style of playing, how much time you have. So let's get back to the game. So normally after c5, white will play c3 or b3, right? Notice how they both kind of dissuade black from pushing c4. Here, Kramnik says, you know what? I'm just going to castle. Giri plays c4, bishop e2, and b5. Again, notice Giri's not developing, but hey, with the position closed like this, it's not that big of a deal. Kramnik plays b3 immediately, attacking this structure. Bishop b7. All right. And notice how Kramnik, although he plays b3, he's not necessarily going to put his bishop here at this point. So b3, bishop b7, and now Kramnik plays another interesting move, knight c3. Very provocative move, attacking this pawn here and provoking it forward in many ways. And Giri plays b4 here, which again, it looks aggressive because you're hitting the knight, of course, knocking it away from the e4 square. However, this kind of allows white to go on a counterattack, and also black's queenside counterplay gets blocked also. White's main ideas in the Colle system is attacking the center with e4, right? Sometimes e5, and then eventually transform that into a king side attack. Black's counterplay usually comes on the queen side. But guess what? If black's pawns are all fixed and can't really move, then how is he going to have a queen side attack? Yes, he has space, right? But that's not going to help him, in the middle game, right, at all. And it's not going to help him at all if white can get his pieces out, right? So yes, the pawns are far advanced, but they're fixed, and they will become targets at some point. I think better and a more critical answer to this move is either queen a5, bishop d2, or a6, which to me is more natural. Now this bishop, of course, seen better days, but I think that's more critical. And then white play b takes c4. Of course, now if a4, then b4, knight b1, c3, and you can see the difference. Yes, the queenside pawns are fixed, but the career is over for this knight. No way out except by sacrifice. And with this, in this particular situation, you can see the stifling effect on the queenside pieces. So here, the move makes sense. But when we go back to the game, b4, the knight is not forced to go to b1. Right? Instead, in the game, it went to a4. And still in the game, and has hopes of going to c5 one day. And even say after a move like a5, eventually, black has to keep an eye on the a6 square. But back to this variation, a6, b takes, and let's say d takes c4. Okay, rook b1, right? So the threat here is just bishop takes c4 here, and if b takes, then the bishop is on pre's here. Therefore, queen c7, and then white will go into his typical play and say knight bd7, f4, bishop e7, and you got a pretty even game right here at this point, where black's pawns on the queen side are still fluid. So both players are still seeking to realize their plans, but black's pawns on the queen side look much more dangerous than in the previous variation, because at least they can move and show fluidity, whereas in the variation in the game, they're fixed and just become targets in the position. So this is why I believe that a6 is a little better to play, right, and not the hasty move b4 that was played in the game. I just want to show you also, because I'm showing you the variation with d takes c4. If b takes c4, right, that's a natural looking move. Then rook b1, and this bishop can be attacked right away. And again, this kind of has a similar effect as in the game, whereby the queen side play for black is not as dangerous, of course, with the pawns like this. And actually, you see white attacking first on the queen side now because of the location of the rook. So after queen c7, white is able to make a nice temporary sacrifice here with e4. And let's say knight takes e4, for example. Knight takes, d takes, and then knight e5. And you can see there's really no adequate way to hold on to this pawn properly. Yeah, bishop d5, but it's extremely anti-positional here. This bishop just becomes pretty much a glorified pawn in this instance. Okay? But it is possible and it is playable, right? Maybe after bishop d5, a move like f3 would have to be played here. But I like white's chances in the long run here. So I definitely prefer in this variation to take with the d pawn. All right. Now, white has more of the center, but black has his typical play on the queen side. So let's remember that and go on with the game. So after knight c3 again, b4, knight came to a4, and then Giri closed up everything with c3. Again, to me, this just inhibits his play on the queen side. White is not really centering this game around queen side counterplay, so to me, you're not really stopping any plans from white, and also he can get his pieces out. White's main concern right now is really getting this last minor piece out. He wants to play e4 at some point, and he can also play a3 to attack this pawn chain. Let's see how he goes about it. So now Kramnik plays nice move knight e5, and it's a natural move in the Colle system. Why is that? Because again, like I said, the idea of eventually getting in the king side counterattack is a common theme. But what it does is it's a practical move. Giri plays bishop d6. Why did he play bishop d6 and not, of course, you know, he prepares castle and everything, but why not a natural move like knight bd7 to, you know, at least scare the knight away, or try to get a quick trade. The reason why is already due to these pawn moves on the queen side, he's weakened the light squares severely. And after knight bd7, Kramnik would just simply play bishop b5. He's not winning the piece here. However, he can't, just solve the problems that he has right away. So, for example, if he just plays a6, Kramnik would take bishop d7, knight d7, knight d7, and now he's forced Giri, that is, to capture with this king, which he doesn't want to do. Why is he forced to capture with the king? The problem is after queen takes, then you can see the knight coming here, and this is what I talked about earlier, how this knight is lurking on a4, waiting to come into c5 and to b6. Dun, dun, dun. So he has to take with the king, and now the next logical operation is to start opening up the position, because hey, as long as the position is closed like this, black's king is still safe. So knight c5 check, bishop takes e5, d takes. Okay, and now things start getting a little fishy here, right? Let's say queen e7, attack the pawn, a3, and it's all about opening up the position. Okay, and now say queen d4, and this is good for white, attacking this pawn and attacking this pawn at the same time. So that's why knight bd7 wasn't played. Knight c6 is possible. Right, it blocks the bishop here, and then play from here. White should attack on the queen side. Start chipping away at those pawns. So again, like a3, for example, a5, and then of course queen d3 could lead to a draw, right? After like maybe some kind of perpetual. But a3, a5, for example, and then two moves. One is knight d3 with the idea of probing that c5 square. This is promising, right? I like this for white. Okay, I'm not worried about this right here because you could just simply just play knight takes b7 there. You know, not really have to worry about this threat at this moment. The other idea is just sorry about that. It's keeping the knight on e5 and then just play knight c5 right away, attacking this bishop. And let's say bishop takes. Now knight takes, b takes, d takes c5. It's castles, and now queen d4. Again, putting pressure on these pawns here. So with these continuations in mind, I think knight c6 is definitely better. Knight bd7, I can see why Gary didn't play that. Knight c6 is definitely playable. Gary chose bishop d6 here. And of course, a3. Right? Just again, those pawns have become fixed targets at this point, right? It's no longer about having all this space. It's just that they're more of a liability than an asset, because they're really not holding up white in any meaningful way, because white is able to play around the pawns. So they're deep in white's territory, but they're not like effective, and therefore they're targets. So you see Kramnik just attacking them. So a3, a5. Again, it's natural to try to hold on to the formation, but what happens is that now again, by playing a5, you know, there's a price to pay with every pawn move, and now Kramnik just sticks the bishop in there with bishop b5 check, and now here's another concession that Gary has to make, and that's moving his king. And now some of you might say, hey, well, you know, I don't want to do that. Why move my king? Again, the problem is, and we touched on it earlier, if knight bd7 here, then just knight takes, knight takes, knight c5. Bishop takes c5, d takes c5, queen c7, and then a takes, rook takes, bishop takes, and now queen d4 with this double attack here on b4 and g7. Another option is to try to play bishop c8 instead of playing bishop takes c5, and then there's a problem because this rook is not protected properly. So now there can be no capture here. So it's just the little subtleties in the position. And you can see how many problems black runs into from moving these pawns somewhat prematurely on the queen side. Like it looked like optically it looks great. It's he has a lot of space, but at the end of the day, if the space is the space advantage or the uh especially in the middle game, if it's not really restricting the movement or hindering uh white's piece placement in a meaningful manner, then it's just literally just taking up space. And of course, you don't want to have the opponent's pawns just entrenched in territory, so it's only natural for you to attack them. And that's just what Kramnik is doing here. You know that the pawns aren't creating enough distraction for him to really be worried about them in a meaningful way, and he can just attack the far advanced pawns. So let's go back. So a3, a5, bishop e5, check. And now king f8. Knight c5, attacking the bishop on b7. Queen comes to b6. Knight takes b7. Queen takes b7. And now just queen e2. And g6. Of course, we want to bring the king to g7, try to connect the rooks, and do something meaningful, right? And again, remember what I also mentioned earlier in the video is white would like to play e4 at some point. And these are the types of moves that hurt the most, is when your opponent has done everything he can to stop you from playing the very move that you wanted to do, and you still do it anyway. And that's usually the sign of the beginning of the end. You see this knight on f6, right? It's supposed to stop e4. The pawn on d5 is supposed to stop e4. And even the queen backing up the pawn, all designed to stop e4. And Kramnik plays e4. What gives? Well, he wants to get this bishop out. Okay, another continuation he could have just played also is f3. It's just as good. A little slower because it does allow king g7 and then e4. So this is maybe like a more positional approach, but definitely valid here. Right? Play could continue, on this light, on this line right here, and white is better. e4 is a little more dramatic. Of course, Giri says, man, I'm going to take that pawn. Knight takes e4. The bishop comes in. And now king e7. Again, with the position being closed, right? Although the king is not able to castle, he's still relatively safe, and white has some work to do. So he kicks the knight out first. f3. The knight, again, deep in white's territory, d2. But again, without being able to have a meaningful attack, the move, the piece placement is not effective. And that's a big lesson in this game. And a big observation that I had looking at this game, I was like, wow, if you just look at the board, it looks like black is really, doing a lot on the queen side, right? Pawns far advanced, knight on d2, but at the end of the day, white's pieces are flourishing. They're doing everything they want to do. So it's just for show, right? It's not effective at all, right? So it's not enough just to gain space or just have your pieces on certain squares. They have to actually be doing something to slow down your opponent. Rook fe1, and now the king safety becomes an issue here, as moves like knight f7 are on the menu. This is why Gary moves the king again at d8. Just to show you a quick idea, this is what white wants to do. He wants to play knight takes f7, king takes f7, and then mate with queen takes e6, with the bishop being here. covering the dark squares, and this bishop covers the light squares. The queen takes care of the rest. This is why Gary moved. And then Kramnik played bishop f4, and Gary resigned in 20 moves. So, real strong game. A classical game by Kramnik. Again, was rated 2808 at the time with the white pieces. Gary was rated 2771. So you're seeing the Colle system, very high level, highest levels of chess. Why did Gary resign at the bishop f1? It's just over here. This bishop, of course, is on prise. The same threats are in the air. You know, let's say bishop f4. I mean, you could do any kind of move here. Bishop f8, bishop g5 check, king c8, bishop f6. It just the abuse just gets worse and worse in the position. So, Gary definitely resigned at a good point. So I'll end it right there. We're gonna look at some more games. I do want to just tell you, interestingly enough, the next year, 2018, Kramnik and Gary played another classical game, and maybe I'll look at that at some point in the Colle system. Kramnik again had the white pieces, and Gary was able to defeat Kramnik in a long game. It's probably like 60-something moves. Game was very drawish, actually, and Kramnik overpressed and wound up losing, but Gary definitely made some adjustments, studied the opening, and was better prepared with the black pieces the next time he faced Kramnik in 2018. So I hope you enjoyed that video. Please like, subscribe, and check the links below because I've placed DVDs and books related to this opening. There's also a link to donate if you would like to support my channel. I would very much appreciate that, and I would love to hear your comments if you do play this opening or not. And if you have any questions, please feel free to leave it down there in the comments below. And I'll see you guys on the next video.